Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with Dr. Fred Moss, who is a distinguished psychiatrist, mental health advocate, and innovative thinker with over 40 years of experience in the field. Dr. Fred, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I'm looking forward to our conversations. Really great to be here.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it as well. But before we get started, just introduce yourself in your own words. Who is Dr. Fred today?
Yeah, so Dr. Fred, I'm a healer. I was born a healer. I was born to a family in chaos and disarray. I had two older brothers, 10 and 14 years old when I was born. And from what I understand, there was a lot of discord in the family. And my job was to show up as a bundle of joy and to bring healing and love to a family that was ready to fall apart. And I think I did a pretty good job for the first couple of years. I don't think my brothers would say that I've done a good job continually for 66 years, but I've done a pretty good job immediately. And in that process, I've really learned that I loved communication. I really loved speaking. I loved listening, and I loved learning. And I remember, vividly being in my playpen and watching my brothers and my parents speak or yell to each other, whatever they were doing, and wishing that someday I could actually do that. And I thought I would learn how to speak when I went to school, right? I mean, I figured that's what school must teach you, is how to communicate.
Right.
But I was sorely disappointed, of course, that in fact, I wasn't allowed to really speak my truth, even as early as first grade and kindergarten. I was very precocious, right? I had all sorts of, I had these two brothers, so they taught me everything. I knew a lot about rock and roll, a lot about sex and drugs and stuff, even as I went into kindergarten. So, most of my friends were interested in like nap time and throwing blocks. And I was already reading books and doing flashcards. But I was also interested in nap time and throwing blocks and stuff after all. But I went through school and really learned that communication was being thwarted. There was no open discourse that was actually, invited. And I just really wanted to learn how to communicate. Later learning that even listening is more important than speaking. As I was going through school, I began to realize that the place I was going to learn was going to be outside of school. So I did a lot of traveling around. I did a lot of hitchhiking when I was growing up. I skipped a lot of school in high school and, did whatever I could do to get out there and really learn what's going on in the community, what's going on. My mom would say, don't go past 8 Mile Road. And I'd be like, past 8 Mile Road that day, it'd be like, whatever
that
I
was the
could do
challenge.
actually.
You took that as how far past 8 Mile Road can I get, right?
Exactly. And I just, decided that, and that I would be able to communicate when I'd be out on the road, right? Like same as you, I was a pretty nomad. I lived without an address for about 12 years and later on in my adult life. And so I always have loved, being on the road and because that's where I learned how to meet people. That's where I learned how to communicate. So going fast forward a little bit, I went to college eventually because the university was only 40 miles away and they had very cool helmets. I went to the University of Michigan and, I thought that I would at least learn how to communicate there. It's a hip city and all that, Ann Arbor, and that it didn't happen there either. It happened in Ann Arbor, but not in school. So I, dropped out and then tried to come back. There was the second time I came back, there was this new industry that my family, my brothers and my parents, and even maybe my sister thought I would be good at. You may have heard of this industry. It's called computers. And so, that was actually being in its foreground. That was like the upstage of computers. And the only computer in Michigan was at the University of Michigan. I mean, it was this 2-acre facility called the computer room. And, we stayed up all night long doing batch jobs and punch cards and turn them in and wait to see. It's like, dude, I'm not doing this either. That's not going to be my career. And so I dropped out again. And this time I promised to my family that I would never go back to university for any reason whatsoever. My mom's like, you don't have to go back, but you have to get a job. Mom, whatever, mom. So, she got me an application for to be a child care worker at a state mental health facility for adolescent boys. I took that job thinking that I would actually, you'll appreciate this, Dan. I took that job thinking that I would actually stay on for 3 weeks because there was orientation for 3 weeks. They were going to pay me to sit in the conference room and doodle or do whatever I do to learn about this hospital thing. And I knew, whatever, I can sit there and get 3 full weeks of pay. And then I could take that money before the job actually started, buy myself a Volkswagen and just travel around the country and figure out what my life was about. That's what my plan was. And so, I remember that as if it was yesterday. It was January 5th, 1980. So we just crossed over 45 years in the field.
Right.
And, but at the time I was truly ready to quit 3 weeks later. And on the fourth week, my friend convinced me to go up to the floors and just try it. So with white knuckles and fear in my bones, I went up to MetaView 5 and sat with those kids who were only like 5 or 6 years younger than me. And, really began to communicate for the first time and really cause healing in that communication, like really be paid to communicate. It was all of a sudden like something I could really fall in line with. I got very good at being a childcare worker. Well, I should say, why did I continue? On the fourth week, my friend Paul convinced me that I should continue because if I quit, he would have to quit and la-di-da-di-da. I was like, dude, okay, I'll come up one more time. So I went up to the floors and went up to MetaView 5 and, I guess I had just said that, but here's the story. For 45 years, I've been considering quitting 3 weeks from now. For the entire 45 years, I've been considering quitting 3 weeks from now. That is very true today, and it's been true every day for 45 years. Wow. Now, why is that? Well, here's the deal. The deal is that I'm not aligned with the field of psychiatry, which I eventually went into. In fact, I went into the field of psychiatry because I couldn't stand it. See, I saw how psychiatry was running these kids. And, we would call the psychiatrist on call if Jimmy was up too late or Timmy and Tony got in a fight. He'd come down, he'd talk to the kids for like 3 seconds. Then he'd talk to us for like 7 seconds. Then he'd go into the nursing station and write something in a chart. And then we'd have to go retrieve the child and hold him down, pull down the side of his hip, on his sweatpants and jam him full of some injectable antipsychotic, anti-anxiety chemical restraining cocktail. And we just have to do that. And if the kid stayed in a stupor for 24 hours, we would have to call that a success story. I just found that to be unacceptably barbaric. And by the way, it's still going on all over the United States every single day. It's happened hundreds of times today. Don't fool yourself. Yeah. Hundreds of times in this country today. That same thing, for sure.
Yeah.
Every day since that, for all 45 years, it's happened every day, hundreds of times, every single day in the United States. It's not like old news. We're not looking back at old news. This is the news. This is real.
Right.
So I went into the field. Because I knew something. I knew that communication was a possibility. I knew that I could actually make a dent if I was learning how to communicate. My brother was already a psychiatrist, so I knew there was a path that I could follow. And into psychiatry, I went back to school one more time, finished my undergraduate degree, and then got accepted to medical school somehow and went to medical school in downtown Chicago at a great school and Northwestern University. And then eventually moved to Cincinnati and had a rip-roaring practice, the second biggest practice in Cincinnati. Marguerite had the first biggest and I had the second biggest, and that's the way that was. And I did that for about 20 years and then decided that I wanted to travel. I decided that, first I decided in 2006, I decided that what I was doing was misaligned with who I was and I couldn't keep doing it. And what I learned in 2006 was really interesting. I began to take some of my, we'll call them low-risk patients, off of their medicine altogether. And lo and behold, reliably and predictably and profoundly, they all got better, every one of them. So then I began to realize that the medicines were actually inducing or perpetuating or increasing or at times even causing the symptoms they're marketed to treat.
Right.
Now, this is quite a finding for young Fred at this point, because what was I supposed to do? I mean, I couldn't keep doing that and hold up my arm and say, first do no harm. I couldn't do that.
Right.
So what could I do? And I wanted to scream it from the mountaintops. I was angry. I was, it was like, I wanted to shake everybody, like, stop doing this. But that isn't a way to communicate. And so I learned how to water it down or mellow it down some, never really water it down. I'm still very passionate about that whole notion. And I began to, really look at over the next several years, how can I make a difference and still be a healer and possibly still stay in psychiatry, which I have quit at least 4 times in my life. So this 3-week thing has happened a couple times. So, how can I do that? And I began to really look at what is the issue here. And over the next several years, became a traveling doc. And that's the 11 years that I told you that I didn't have an address. And I didn't have an address. I had PO boxes in cities that I had never been to. I had, I have, I don't know, something like 6 straight years of being in a Marriott. I'm pretty good platinum elite member of Marriott. I know how to live on the road a bit and when staying in hotels. And I really enjoyed that job too. Although psychiatry is really the same everywhere in the country. I went all over the country and had licenses in multiple different states. And psychiatry is very similar all over the country, but it's not similar all over the world. So I began to take my act around the world, and I did some psychiatry. It became very clear to me that telepsychiatry was going to be a thing long before this most recent event.
Right.
In 2013, I taught mastering telehealth to a bunch of people because I could see that it was coming. And, I began to do telehealth from wherever I was, which was really fun. So I did telehealth from Thailand and from Bhutan and from Nepal and from Israel and from France and Italy and England. I was, piping back in here to the rural Illinois or suburban cities in California, whatever, and meeting people online. It was pretty cool. All the while trying to figure out how to push communication to the center of the forefront, because that's where real healing happens when a person connects. After all, that's what we're really after. That's why we're having this podcast. It's why people are people. We're social beings, and we need to connect with other social beings. Simple as that. And when that doesn't happen, then we get something that looks like a malady, or it looks like an illness. It looks like a disease or a syndrome. And it's actually not. It's a response to our communication breaking down, our inability to self-express, or our difficulty in listening or being with a group that accepts us. So once I started to know this, it was like, well, how am I going to build a brand after all this? What am I going to do? Rolling into my 30th year and 35th year, what am I going to do to actually be able to stay in the field and make a difference? And I began to, I wrote a couple books, and then I created this brand. The brand is called Welcome to Humanity. It makes sense, right? You start Welcome to Humanity is what's really here. Whenever you have a problem, that's a great answer to it. More than likely, it's just a welcome to humanity circumstance. And really getting that pain and misery are, pretty prominent in our human existence, in our human condition, and have been forever. There's nobody who ever wrote about a time where there wasn't pain and misery at the center of their existence. Everybody's had it forever. All billions and billions of us have dealt with it. So it's not sick to have that, it's not sick to feel pain. It's not sick to be uncomfortable. So Welcome to Humanity takes that in consideration. Then I wrote a couple books, and I did my own podcast. I've dropped 300 podcasts on my own as a host, and also been on about 250 as a guest. So I like communicating on podcasts. And the idea here is, I did something called True Voice Podcasting, where I taught a bunch of people how to be podcasters. My one book is called Find Your True Voice, and my other book is called The Creative 8, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression, because I don't know a better place. I don't know a more potent way to get people to become optimized in their life than to hear them, than to actually really be with them, to actually connect with them, to actually get them and resonate in a harmonic way. So when we do that, that's where healing takes place. So at the center of all healing is a human connection. And when I was able to really see that, this became much more clear. And I began to able to be a psychiatrist much more aligned with what I'm saying here. There's no patient I have who would be surprised about listening to what I have to say right here. Now, I'm still doing some conventional work. I still have a full-time job, and they at times still ask me to diagnose and medicate people. And I don't like doing either of those things. I think that diagnosing is also a trauma in and of its own right. We have a lot of audacity to blame someone for being abnormal, or to give somebody an abnormal label,
Yeah, we definitely love our labels in this country for sure. Well, actually, in the world, it's not just this country; it's in the world.
No.
We love giving people labels.
It is in the world. And why do we diagnose people anyways? The reason we diagnose people, the reason people want to be diagnosed, is so that they can relinquish responsibility for the things in their life that aren't going as well as they hoped. So if I'm angry with my wife, I get too angry with her. I lay down a paper, or if my thinking goes sideways, or I become scared or hopeless about the future, I have a psychiatric diagnosis for you. And then you could say, it's not me. It's, honey, that wasn't me. That was my ADHD, or that was my PTSD, or that was my bipolar disorder. So that's at least one reason. Now, before we get too far along here, and for your listeners' benefit, it's very important to realize that for some people, psychiatry is really, really great the way it is. And, if you're out there and you really love your diagnosis, you love your therapist or your doctor, you love your your treatment plan and you love your medicine that you're taking, and you wouldn't trade it for the world because it's the best thing you've ever imagined, and there is a group of people that meet that criteria, by all means, please keep doing what you're doing. If you found that in any aspect of life, any aspect, if you reached a point where you wouldn't trade this for anything better, then please keep doing exactly what you're doing. You have found nirvana. Okay, that's awesome. But this is really for the hundreds of millions of people who don't meet that criteria, who see themselves as being, misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, overdiagnosed, mistreated, undertreated, overtreated, whatever. And so that's how I became the undoctor. And the undoctor is a pretty cool phrase, a pretty cool moniker that really means undiagnosing people, unmedicating people, and then undoctrinating people, like ushering people out of the psychiatric industrial complex, like actually taking them and reminding them that they should not come in here. Don't come in here. It's like if you go to a barbershop enough times, as both me and you have learned, you get a haircut. If you go to a psychiatrist enough times, you get a diagnosis. In fact, that no psychiatrist is ever going to let you out of their office without giving you some form of a diagnosis, because that's how they get paid. Now, you think those diagnoses are benign, but they're not. They stay with you like gum on your shoe, and they're real. And now you have a psychiatric diagnosis in your resume or in your history that it becomes a relatively well-known knowledge that you have that. And not that there's anything wrong with having that, but it might get in the way of you having the freedom of the life that you choose down the road. Not in a hurry to diagnose anybody, not in the hurry to get, to treat anybody with medicine, because ultimately what people really want more than anything, as we've already discussed, is to be heard, is to be listened to, is to be connected. And that's what I do. And so welcome to Humanity True Voice Technology, Undoctor, Find Your True Voice. I've written a couple courses and I've been on a few stages, and that's really how I go now. I still have a coaching practice, a transformational coaching practice, and I take care of people. And if those people who are on the fence about whether or not they should go into the psychiatric world and get a diagnosis and medication, they're my favorite people. That's my sort of best target audience. Because I can actually walk them off the ledge. I can actually turn them around and have them get that they could get a whole lot better without going into that system. Little harder for people who are already in the system, realizing that they're being grinded up by the meat grinder. That's a little bit harder because those people are already affected, and at least one point in their life bought the farm. At one point, they decided there was something wrong enough with them that they should take medicine every day, or they should go to the hospital, or they should accept their diagnosis, or whatever it is. And that's a little bit of a harder crew to detox or to undo, to undoctor. Right. But I'm willing to work with them. I'm really willing to work with parents and children of them. And, again, there's hundreds of millions of people who are caught up in the system and not getting better. In fact, they're in a system whose treatment is designed to induce, increase, perpetuate, or cause the symptoms it's marketed to deal with.
Right. It's not really looking for a solution. It's just creating a lifelong treatment.
Well, a lifelong and worsening treatment.
Yeah.
If all it was keeping things steady, and you got to stay in, that'd be fine. But people get worse. They get way worse, and they get worse progressively, and that just happens because that's the way the system is designed.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything that's very controversial. Ultimately, if people would just look at the truth, there's nothing. No one ever. It's not like I'm not that far off center.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit how you're traveling and meeting different people in different cultures.
Yeah.
Has benefited you in your practice and in your communication. I mean, you're to your own point, you are a communicator at heart. So how did that travel and exposing yourself to different people and different cultures help with your own communication process and then ultimately your practice?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So, in my travels, what I really wanted to see is what was universal about humanity. Not just about Californians or Michiganders, not just about like what's really human. When I travel around, if I go into the sticks, or if I go into the big cities, or if I go into the into the mountains, or if I go into the rural or the city or the suburban or areas, or if I travel to other countries in Europe or Asia or Israel, I really get a better handle of what is a human, like what is universally human. And that's where I really got to, every single human, even the monks who are in the caves, are super interested in human connection. And maybe they've had their heart broken, so they tend to veer away from the fear of having it broken again. But ultimately, what we're really looking for is to be loved and to love another human or many other humans. So this really affected the whole idea of welcome to humanity, rather than like welcome to American psychiatry or welcome to, like I broadened my reach to be able to communicate effectively in all settings. I like to joke that I'm just as effective in a downtown crack house as I am in a mansion in the hills. And it's kind of true. I'm able to, work my way through being with people of all persuasions. And that just comes, with being so committed to communication be at the heart of all healing and being a healer at the same time.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. I mean, that's one of the things we've been able to experience through our own travels is just seeing how everybody does long for that connection, regardless of your color, your creed, your political beliefs. Like at the end of the day, if you just sit down and actually have a conversation, and a conversation that's, like you said earlier, equally as much listening as it is talking, if not more.
At least,
Because
yeah.
I think a lot of people go into the conversation, and you can tell when you're talking to someone like this where they're just looking for the next thing they're going to say, and they're not really listening to what you're saying, and that's not really it's not really communicating, and it's something that I think has gotten us to where we are today in such a polarized climate, that if we would just kind of take a step back and listen more than we talk, we could probably make a lot more progress. But that's definitely been one of our blessings in our travels, is just seeing, how different people are, but yet at the same time, how much we do still have that one common thread of our own humanity, like you said. So I love that's kind of one of your driving forces behind or not one of your, really your driving force behind your
100%.
your
Exactly.
practice.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when you're talking to when you're talking to people who are in the field traditionally, and they're looking at you as an outlier, like how do you approach those conversations, and where do you go?
I think that I'm only speak directly to their humanity. I'm not saying anything that's really ultimately very controversial. All I'm really saying is that humans are humans and we're one of them. That's all I'm really saying. And that maybe there's nothing wrong with you, and maybe there's nothing wrong with them inherently. Maybe they're just trying to bumble, stumble, and tumble through this world that is so challenging and obstacle ridden that none of us know what the hell we're doing. And just because those people act in a certain way that's outside our range of what the prevailing conversation seems to suggest normality is, we have the audacity to call them abnormal, or call them diseased or dysfunctional or wrong or bad or different or whatever. And then, when we really get that, like when I worked in the prison, I've worked in pretty much every modality known to Western psychiatry. And I've certainly worked in high security prisons here in California. I've worked in a couple famous prisons. I worked in Pelican Bay, and I worked at Folsom State. And when I worked in the prisons, there was an opportunity to really get in touch with those, the people who are in for life. And these people, more than anything, they were just like so fresh to be connected with. Like it was great. It was so much fun to be with these non-pretend fun. It's a funny word. I'm not sure that working in the prison was all that fun ultimately, but it wasn't because of the inmates. Never.
Right.
Not, no, the inmates are cool.
Interesting.
You can infer whatever you need to after that. The inmates
Yeah.
are cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, when you start talking about our prison system in general, that could be a whole nother podcast where, it's not really, they call them correctional institutes, but they're not correctional institutes. I mean, they're not looking to heal people and get them back out on the street and make them productive members of societies. I mean, it is truly, a punishment. And I understand some crimes do need to be, punished for it. I get that. But there's a lot of people in that system who could, with the right treatment, get back into society and become productive members of society. So again, I don't want
So
to get
let's
us too
take.
far off topic, but
Well, no,
I
that's
want you
not
to
off
jump in
topic.
on that.
That's not off topic at all. As a matter of fact, everything you just said while you were saying it, I was applying it to the mental health institutions. Same exact thing.
Yeah,
Most of the people who are caught up in the mental health institutions, if properly taken care of, could return to the world and return to workforce and return to be their families and actually find love and peace and contribution in the world. And all they would really need is the proper treatment, which includes human connection, which at the forefront is being connected with, understanding, being with, and creating a harmonically resonating relationship with these people. Like in the end, when that happens, that's right when the magic happens. It doesn't take time. It doesn't take months or years on a couch. It doesn't take some amount of milligrams of ongoing medication. It really just takes having the guts and the willingness to be there with another person. And then healing actually takes place for both of us.
Yeah. I love that. Obviously, you're on the road less traveled here in your field. How do you keep from just getting frustrated and understanding that you alone aren't going to be able to change the system, that more people got to get on the road that you're on to really change that system? How do you keep from getting frustrated? Or is that part of your, you're quitting 3 weeks from now? Is that what feeds that?
Yeah, it kind of is what feeds that, and I've always been, for what it's worth, I've always been on the road less traveled. Right back from when school started. With the fact that I knew who Procol Harum was when I started kindergarten, separated me from a lot of, like, I really understood a bit about Procol Harum and when I was 5, and most people don't even still know who Procol Harum is. And it was like what is war? What is pot? What is drinking? What is sex? And I'm left-handed, tall. I was always sort of the smartest kid in my class, but also the one who got in the most trouble. So I've always been on the edge. And how do I manage that inside of my field? By realizing that what I'm offering here is a freaking gold nugget, straight up. And all these people have to get is that's all good medicines out of their back pocket and treatments that they don't even know how they work, and they wouldn't take them on a bet. Like they wouldn't take the medicines that they prescribe on a bet. Rightfully, I would not be cruel enough to tell them to do it. And those medicines don't work, the diagnoses don't work, and just being very honest about it. It's not like there's a lot of hatred towards me. I'm not really doing anything. I mean, the truth is the medicines are not the problem. The medicines and the diagnoses are not the problem. The doctors and the therapists are definitely not the problem. If we have an entryway into this spiraling cycle, it would be that people think there's something wrong with them and that they need to go to a doctor to get fixed. It's this notion that has been sold and then bought. You see, who cares what they're selling? They can sell whatever they want. They can sell snake oil. They can sell rat poison. They can sell what they want. When we buy it, that's where the problem starts.
Right.
We can't blame them for selling their product. After all, it's a fantastic business model. Dude, if I could actually create a product that caused the symptoms that had you need that product,
yeah,
that's sweet.
Yeah.
That's going to create a multi-billion-dollar per day profit margin. Who would blame that company for setting that up? Congratulations. Yeah. Like, it's beautiful. And does that system cause damage to the client or the patient or the recipient or the resident or the customer or whatever you want to call them? Well, definitely it does. And each and every one of us, if we could see that, again, in most cases. Now, again, let me disclaim the group that we already talked about that's happy with where things are and they thinking that I'm not right. And I'm not here to argue with that at all. If you really have found your path down the psychiatric road that's working for you at the highest level, and you're so happy to have found everything about it that you wouldn't dare consider any other alternative, please just definitely keep doing what you're doing. This is for a conversation for the people who know they're not getting the life that they deserve, the one life that they deserve while they're on this planet. And that some of that has to do with the diagnosis that they're agreeing to, with the diagnosis they've been given, with the treatment plans that they've been given, with the medications that are, those people know who they are. They appreciate this. And I know that I'm making a big difference with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. So, Doc, I mean, we really just scratched the surface. And we got to start wrapping things up. But is there anything that we missed that you think would be, extremely vital to the listeners before we wrap up tonight?
Well, I normally answer questions like this with the same thing, and I think it fits right here too, which is once you become pretty sure that there's something wrong with you, you have joined the human race. We all think that about ourselves.
Right.
Welcome to humanity.
Yeah.
Like, it is a natural quality of being a normal human being to know that you're not normal. Each and every one of us knows that about ourselves because we compare our insides with everybody's outsides. So the ultimate truth is maybe there's nothing wrong with you. We don't blame a log for burning in the fire. This is a challenging, highly stimulating, highly obstacle-filled, divisive world that we're living in. Like it's a difficult world to navigate, and we're being slammed with new things all the time. It's not necessarily worse than it ever was. It's always been the worst it ever. Ask anybody from any era, and they will tell
It's
you
the word. Yeah.
we lived in the worst that it ever was. That's how people say. So it's not that much worse than anyone. It's just hard to put it all together. And we don't blame a log for burning in the fire. That's what logs do when they're in fire. So what we do when we're in an environment like this is we acquire habits of, for instance, not communicating, not using our true voice. We pretend to be somebody that we're not in order to protect the person that we are. Dude, are you serious? And every one of us knows that we're doing that.
Yeah.
And every one of us is willing to accept it when another person does it, to the point where we sometimes don't talk when we know we have something to say. Or even worse, we say things that even we don't believe. What?
Right.
What? Where did you get, even you don't think you're lying and you don't believe it. It's super funny that we've reached that level. The massive men go through life in quiet desperation and then go to their graves with their songs still in them. That's, Henry David Thoreau. If you're going to communicate effectively with another human being, it's very good to find your core values, your authentic, genuine, real, honest self. And that way you get access to your frequency, whatever your frequency is as a human. And that's what's required to resonate with another human. It's just like tuning forks. What do me and you have in common? We're human.
Yep.
And pretty much the best I know, every person I've ever met has been a human.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I think we need to keep in mind is none of us have had a dress rehearsal for what we're going through.
Not at all.
We're all doing this
We're all
human
winging
experience the first time.
Exactly.
So just a little bit of empathy,
compassion.
understanding each other's humanity would go a long way as well,
Exactly.
So Doc, how, if people want to reach out to you, find out more about what you're doing, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, so I buzz around too much on Facebook, but I think I'm going to be leaving that, so I'm not going to invite people there. And I like LinkedIn, but really my websites are welcometohumanity.net and drfred360.com. So welcometohumanity.net and drfred360.com. And both places have a little click where you can schedule a discovery call. I'd be glad to talk to any of your listeners about whatever they're going through. And that's probably the best two places. I also have a school and a Mighty Networks community called Welcome to Humanity. So you can tap on that as well. I love both those communities and love creating a place where people can communicate effectively. Creating an open space where people can come in and heal themselves by connecting with like-minded individuals. So that's probably the best places for people to find me on the internet.
Excellent. Excellent. So, Dr. Fred, that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So what's one of the little things that you do on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place?
Well, I've been thinking about this question. Thanks for briefing me beforehand. And I'm not really sure which of the answers I was going to choose, but there's something about, if I want to be honest, there's something about getting up out of bed, just like getting up out of bed every single day and stepping outside and taking a look at this vast sky. These days there's some shit in the sky that I wish wasn't there. There's a couple of drones that sit out over my apartment that I don't like, but the moon is there if it's still dark. And then if the sun has come up, I get to enjoy that. And really just kind of stretching and knowing that I'm here with divinity. I'm here with the cosmos. And then I have this beautiful wife I sleep with, and I have these awesome cats that I sleep with. And then, preparing the day, actually getting the momentum going and realizing that I have some responsibilities to take care of this family of mine, my wife, my cats, etc. And I think that, by setting an example of that, I get grounded by meditating in the morning, coming up with my gratitude list, taking a cold shower, just getting myself prepared to start the day. I have a position in the world where people are looking up to me and counting on me for answering suggestions or for guiding them. And if I can do all this, then I'm going to show up as a pretty cool human being. And if I can show up as a pretty cool human being, what more can I really do in the world?
Yeah, I love that. That's a great answer. Absolutely great answer. Well, Doc, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. I know you've got a really busy schedule. We had to reschedule a couple of times to get this thing done, but we finally got it there, and I think it's going to be very good for the listeners to check this one out. So I'm really, really grateful that you could get on here and share your knowledge with my listeners. For everybody out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com. While you're there, pick up a copy of one of my books through our Pay It Forward program, where Sandy and I will donate it to somebody somewhere along the line in our travels. And again, Dr. Fred, really appreciate the time. It's a great conversation.